President Zelensky and before him President Trump. Well, for his assessment, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskowicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskowicz. So a new stage in the shuttle diplomacy that Donald Trump has been promoting and leading over Ukraine, and it's the first time that the US will sit down with Russian and Ukrainian negotiating teams around presumably the same table to talk about the peace deal that the US has been hammering out. So is this crunch time?
I don't think it's so much crunch time as a progress. It has to be given to Donald Trump some credit that he's managed to get now trilateral discussions, which was previously impossible. And it would appear that both sides have made some sort of concessions about the other points, which are namely, can Western troops be deployed under whatever guise in Ukraine? And can Ukraine be a part of NATO and the EU? It would appear that somewhere along the line, some sort of concessions have been made. But the key sticking point is, as it always was, the territory. Russia wants the whole of Donbass. Ukraine has said no. What is missing for our information as the media and for the rest of the world, of course, is quite simple. What are these concessions that have been made? We're just guessing. Moreover, it seems odd they're just talking about territory, where there's at least one other very important point being made, namely, would it be recognized de jure as part of Russian territory, or would it be simply that they find a shuffle or trick by which Ukraine does not accept that this is Russian territory, but Russia remains in occupation? All this is still in the air. And of course, there are plenty of other points which have been made along the line in the peace process, whether Putin and Russia have to pay some sort of reparations or whether there'll be war crime trials. None of this has been mentioned, so presumably it has all been dropped. So as far as we can tell, there is some progress, but it is impossible to say at this juncture that the war will finish. Please note, Russia has recently ruled out yet again a ceasefire and is apparently encircling some Ukrainian army or other.
Well, those are good points you raise, crucial, obviously, to these talks. We'll come back to that question you raised there about whether the Americans will be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And of course, as far as Ukraine is concerned, it's now time for Russia to show whether it's playing games or whether it's serious about peace. I mean, do you have a similarly skeptical view to the one the Ukrainians seem to hold about the prospects in Abu Dhabi?
Well, the fact of the matter, it takes two to tango. And if you say, as you have just now said, the Ukrainians have said that Russia may well be playing games. From the Russian point of view, Ukraine's playing games. I mean, this is negotiation. No negotiations with the Russians are easy. Poland has had 19 of them to no real good end. And therefore, this is just another one. What is the case is Russia prepared to cede more of its demands, but at the same token, exactly the same goes for the Ukrainians. Are the Ukrainians prepared to cede more of their demands? And since we're not even sure what is actually being discussed, it is simply propaganda to state that Russians are playing games, because to be quite honest, both sides want peace on their terms. And that's not really playing games, that's negotiation.
And from what we understand, I mean, a key part of this for the Ukrainians, actually, I'll come to that in a minute, but let me ask you this first, because we talked about the Americans pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Is it possible that the Americans will find some formula or some dramatic new initiative which allows both sides to feel that their interests are being met? Could they provide that kind of heft? Or you can't see it? Because I know you touched on it briefly previously.
Yeah, obviously Americans have done very well because it would appear the only sticking point now left is the territorial one. So they've presumably found a form of words and an agreement on troops being deployed in Western troops, that is, being deployed in Ukraine, and also on the business of whether Ukraine can be part of NATO or not. And so presumably they've succeeded on that one. And therefore, it is possible they could succeed on this one. However, it has to be pointed out the Russians as even many negotiators with them, not just Poland. Adolf Hitler found Joseph Stalin the most implacable, difficult negotiator he'd ever faced. And so therefore the Russians haven't changed over the centuries, and they are very hard to pull the wool over their eyes. They're not quick. There will be no quick fixes. They will have to study carefully all what's being said. I anticipate that there will be discussions. The discussions will not actually resolve. On the other hand, they will agree to carry on talking, because the Americans have done very well to just bring it down to one sticking point. But it would be nice to see exactly what they're talking about. Please note, we are discussing this right now on a rise in the void. We don't really know what the agreements have been made on any sort.
Well, obviously, we can glean from what's been said ahead of going into these talks. And from what we understand, a key part of this for Ukraine and an essential element of these trilateral talks is the issue of security guarantees and the deal that the US and Ukraine say that they've done to protect Ukraine in the future if Russia were to invade again. So obviously everyone keen to hear what Russia has to say about that and whether it'll agree to it. So what do you reckon?
Actually, the security guarantees are just hot air, as the Russians well know, because there were security guarantees in 1994. And in fact, if you look at the history of the world, there's always been security guarantees and treaties, and many of them have been broken. And so I don't think the Russians are going to be remotely worried about what America has said it may or may not do should Ukraine be attacked again by Russia. That is not a sticking point. The sticking point is the territory. How much will Ukraine cede, and how much will it cede de jure? This is one of the key points as far as one can gather. And here, as far as one can gather, Russia is in a maximalist position because it appears to be winning on the military front, and because it's quite clear that President Donald Trump gets on well with President Putin. That is the key issue. The security guarantees, which really obsess Zelensky, are, to my mind, I think, irrelevant. But Donald Trump has said something. It would appear he has agreed to 15 years worth of support or something along those lines, although it has to be pointed out, unless they're in concrete and unless there's some sort of boots on the ground, they're actually quite meaningless.
So in that context, I mean, do you agree with those who say that only defeat on the battlefield will stop President Putin's war efforts? Is Mr. Putin in on this to the death, or are you an optimist who believes that Mr. Putin might just concede on some major points?
I'm afraid I've got an even worse answer for you than those critics. First of all, it's perfectly true that President Putin is into this. He made the attack. He must secure success. A dictator cannot fail. He will lose power immediately the next day. And therefore, it is quite clear he will press for those maximalist demands. However, if he wins, he will carry on fighting. I predict an invasion of Poland, as you know in my books, and we a nuclear one. Even if he were to fail, the only way he could actually save his position is by scaling up the war and attacking those people who are supplying Ukraine, which is namely, above all, Poland. And therefore, the situation is that this war is not the war to end all wars, but merely an interim war. And even were President Putin to be defeated, he would still be able to carry on if he acted sufficiently quickly. And if he wins, just as badly. So therefore, my answer to yourself on that point is the war of some sort is likely to carry on.
Meanwhile, of course, Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure in the dead of winter have been relentless, leaving many people freezing in their homes. And I guess many people would be right to feel that that is not the sign of a president in Russia who actually wants peace, is it?
Well, he wants peace on his terms, and he's now trying to force the Ukrainians. Actually, it's baffling why he's attacking the energy facilities. During World War II, the person in command of the British bombing effort, Bomber Harris, actually stated that these sort of panacea targets don't work. And it would appear to be the case because they've been attacking the energy structure for near on 4 years. The truth of the matter is people can withstand being cold, especially Slavs, who, by the way, have been through very cold winters before central heating was invented, and they coped. And the same thing happens now. It is not impossible for Slavs because they're used to cold weather. That's what it boils down to. And no, the point is that Ukrainians, of course, being Slavs like Russians, and for the matter, Poles are, of course. The point here is that President Putin wants what he wants, and President Zelensky wants what he wants. They're two incompatible goals. We can only hope the Americans can find some formula, as you said before, you put it very amusingly, a rabbit out of the hat, yes, to find that they will be both satisfied. But it has to be said, in all honesty, it does appear unlikely. And far more to the point, there will be no immediate cessation of the war effort because it is in Russia's interest to do so, because that's why it has managed to acquire this territory and has the possibility of acquiring still more. It is precisely the attacks it makes in Ukraine that has brought Ukraine to the negotiating table from Russia's point of view. And therefore, they will continue. So as things stand, an unpleasant winter ahead for Ukrainians.
On that rather dark prognosis, I want to thank you as ever for being brutally honest and very, very illuminating your analysis as always. Dr. Marek Laskovic is the author and international affairs analyst talking to me on the line from London.